Well, it was really a rather extraordinary day in New York. Not only was it gorgeous, it was a primary day. There were those of us who hoped the good weather would bring out the vote. When I went to vote before coming to work, I met old friends I hadn't seen for a while. It was a very, very happy morning.
I got up, got on the train, came into work as usual, except that I was just a little bit late. And I had just put my coffee and roll down on my desk and was heading up to snitch the Times when the first plane hit the tower. Everyone in our building most people had been through 93. And 93 just rattled the windows. The building almost seemed to want to twist. And I was standing there and I turned to a research assistant who was there also and I said, I don't know what that was, but I'm leaving.
So there I was on September 11th, walking up towards the fountain, and I was about to sit down when I heard this humongous, loud noise. And you know, you look left and you look right. You don't think to look up. And then I heard this whistle, which, for those of us who like action films, was quite recognizable, actually. And it really sounded like a missile whistle. And then I heard this large, just big boom, and looked up and saw that the first tower had an explosion on the upper levels. And you stand there and you stare and you don't believe what you see. And you sort of freeze. And there was a gentleman near me who had the good sense to start running because it woke me up. And I said, well, if he's running, I better start running. And when glass started hitting my head, I knew I better start running.
It was such a beautiful day that day. It was bright blue sky and not a cloud in the sky. And so the sun was shining very strong. And the sun was shining on these bits of paper. And so they almost sparkled. It looked beautiful, actually, until we realized what it was that we were seeing.
It was an unnatural boom and an unnatural shake. I hadn't felt or heard anything like that since about 30 years earlier in Vietnam, and it was wrong. Whatever it was wrong. And I stopped, and my boss was sitting not far away. I said, I'm out of here. I opened my desk, grabbed my bag, and she was right with me. A lot of the people in the building had been there in 1993 when the bombing occurred. So nobody was going to wait for an alarm to go off or anything like that. So we got out of the library into the hallway, and indeed the hallway was bustling with people going through the disaster drill. I'm standing there watching this going, what in... And I noticed, because the paper was coming straight out of the building and flying out into the plaza. But there were other things coming straight down. And I'm looking at them, you know, and they were pretty much universally white at one end and various colors at the end. I realized I was watching people who had been forced to make a decision a human can't imagine.
I went with this colleague and looked out the window, and we could see this huge fire in the sky, you know, up in the towers, and just thought, there's been this horrible accident. I went back to my desk and I called my husband because just to tell him what was going on and to ask him to look out the window, because we live in Brooklyn, but we had over the trees of the Botanic Garden a view of the towers, and he, you know, he looked out and said he could see the same thing that I saw. But still, we talked, I got off the phone with him, and I went back to work.
It was just an unbelievable sound. I mean, I have season tickets for the Jets, and a lot of times they do flyovers on the planes, and I knew darn well that that was something that was really low and not something that was high up in the sky. I knew it was a plane, but So loud crash, the noise was unmistakable. Immediately, I got off the phone and I paused for about 5 seconds and said, Chuck, I'll have to call you back, and hung up. And heard all these cars honking outside, saw people running, because my view is of Vesey Street and looking north. I got up and ran to the other side of the building that's right in front of the World Trade Center. And what I had thought, what I didn't want to believe that I heard actually had happened. And there was a huge gap, I'd say, above the 80th floor, 85th floor. That was just incredible. It was really kind of surreal. I saw a couple people jump to their death.
As I was standing there watching, some women started screaming, they're jumping. And then I realized that these things that seemed to be falling off the side of the building were actually people coming down. And what they were doing was, at least some of them had taken draperies and whatever and tried to fashion a parachute of sorts, but that didn't work. And fortunately, I didn't have to see anyone hit the pavement because they actually dropped to this roof. It was a 3 or 4 story surround building. At least, on the side I was. I heard it was much worse looking in the courtyard area. And that just kept happening, and every time someone would scream and people were crying, and I never thought I'd have to see anything like that. That was really the worst part.
The director of Vera, I remember coming by, Chris Stone, saying to me, there are people jumping out. There are people jumping out. You can see the bodies falling. And I thought, I don't need to look. I don't need to look anymore.
All of a sudden there was this huge explosion in the other building. And no one was really saying anything, so I didn't realize that a plane had hit the building. I just assumed someone had managed to get a bomb up there. And then when this other one exploded, it was just a massive fireball, and people were kind of stunned for a moment, and then everyone just stampeded up the street because it looked like the fire was coming right at us. And I had no choice but to join them and run, or I would have been trampled. About halfway down the block, there was an open door for a store, and people were standing in it, but I just dived in because I said if I fell or got pushed, I'd be trampled. So I just wanted to get out of the crowd and to safety. And then the crowd was gone. They went by, and so we kind of stepped out to see what had happened. And there was high heels laying on the street, and glasses and other things people had dropped.
People were gathered. People were very calm. I mean, people were obviously frightened. There were people crying. I remember seeing a pregnant woman who was just trying to keep it together. I saw women's shoes in the street. I would guess that they just ran, when they maybe saw the plane overhead.
At one point I found myself across the street from the American Stock Exchange, and I remember looking down on the ground and seeing a lot of office papers, airline tickets, and I saw a woman's shoe. And at the time I just thought, oh my gosh, how did someone lose a shoe? I mean, later on I realized it was probably from someone who fell from the building. But anyway, as I was there, across the street from the American Stock Exchange, I heard someone say, heads up, and I looked up, and a big piece of something, the building or something, came crashing down on the ground.
It was so very odd, because on the streets, in the financial district and all around, it was just debris everywhere, but strange debris, like clothing, shoes. It was clear that people had just run. And so they'd run out of their shoes. There were briefcases. There were just things everywhere.
I could see a gaping hole and flames and smoke coming out of the top of One World Trade. At that moment, it's such an unbelievable sight that you don't know what to think. And I, along with other people, were frozen on that corner. just looking at that, the minute I saw it, I said, oh my God, as I'm sure was said millions of times that day in New York, and didn't know what to do or what to think. My instinct was not to run, but was to get to the office as quickly as possible, and that's what I did.
I remember shaking as soon as I saw that, and my first words are, oh my God. And I couldn't believe what I was looking at. It was a big, black, gaping hole in the North Tower. To this day, I don't really know how I moved the additional 2 blocks towards my campus to get to my building. And at that time, my building was being evacuated. People were coming out as I was trying to go in.
When we knew that the second one wasn't an accident, yeah, I felt afraid. I felt like the city, my city, was under attack, and I was scared.
On my floor, my colleagues guided us to go downstairs at once through the stairways. When I was coming down, in the middle, there was a platform, I don't know which floor it was, but there the security people were guiding us to go 1 floor down through the escalator. And on that floor, there was a window. So I went near that window and I saw up the other tower was in the flame at the top. But I didn't know what's happening. And then the people started panicking. They were running here and there. There was one exit. I was familiar with that exit. But from that exit, people were coming inside. So I turned from there and started walking fast in other direction.
You could visually see the metal on the building melting, which was just so astonishing, you know, having seen these buildings for a good part of my life, to see the metal melting. And all I could think was, oh my God, this is just so terrible and so tragic, and the people above those floors are never going to get out of there. So a number of people stood and watched, but my instinct is when you see something that looks kind of dangerous to you, get away from it. Don't stand there and wait for, you know, anything worse to happen. So I immediately started walking toward Pace University, which is only about 4 blocks from the World Trade Center. And I walked across City Hall Park to Broadway. When I got to Broadway, I turned around to look again. And again, this vision that was just so incredible that I thought I'd never in my entire life see.
I had just turned to walk north when I heard people screaming, "Run for your life." And so I started to run. And within a minute of that running, I heard this monumental explosion behind me. And I never turned around to see the fireball of the second plane crashing into the South Tower. I had no idea what it was. I kept thinking, we're being bombed, but I thought, how could enemy aircraft get through our defenses? And I was afraid to turn around because I thought if I did, I might trip and fall. No one was hysterical or panicked, but they were running.
Sometime late morning, a school bus pulled up, and somebody was knocking on the glass door, and when we went to see